because this is going to be the phylum Arthropoda. And the phylum Arthropoda, or the arthropods, as we're going to refer to them frequently too, is one of the largest phylums in the entire animal kingdom. So if you remember back when we started the invertebrate unit, we discussed how invertebrates make up about 95% of all organisms in the animal kingdom. 80% of that 95% are arthropods. So that means the 15% roughly are about what the other phylums that we've discussed. The other 80% are going to fall into these phylums. Because it's so big, I did want to break it into 3 separate classes. So we're going to look at the crustacea, which are all the crustaceans like shrimp, crab, and lobsters. Then we're going to also look at the Chelicerata, which are all the arachnids and spiders, as well as Insecta, which are all of the insects. So all 3 of these classes of organisms are going to have a variety of things that they're going to share in common, which makes them be in the same phylum. But remember, according to classification, there's going to be some physical characteristics that are going to separate the crustaceans from the spiders from the insects. So without further ado, let's go. So arthropods, like we mentioned, are the largest phylum of animal, and arthropod literally means jointed foot. Remember that root pod meaning foot, arthro meaning jointed. So they have this hard exoskeleton with movable joints. Now remember, the exoskeleton is going to be exo meaning outside, or exit. You can kind of think about it like that, outside. So their skeletons can be on the outside. It's going to be a really firm covering that is going to surround their entire internal organs to protect them. And they are jointed, like where I'm drawing these red dots, so that this hard skeleton can actually move. So very similar to how we have joints in between our bones to allow them to move, their actual joints are located on the outside of their bodies because of the exoskeleton that they have. So pretty much wherever I've drawn red dots, that's where you can find the joints on these organisms. They have some shared characteristics. So all organisms that are in this phylum are going to share the following thing. They are going to be bilaterally symmetrical. So remember, once again, if I do a line of symmetry down this tarantula right here, you're going to see equal number of limbs on this side, as well as there's eyes on both sides. There's chelicerae on both sides. They've got pedipeds, and their abdominal region can actually be divided in half as well too. So that's bilateral symmetry. They also, this exoskeleton that they have is made of chitin. So there's that material again. Remember, not only is chitin found in the fungal cell walls, but it also is in our fingernails. If you feel your fingernails right now, you can feel how hard and firm they are. It's the same material that's also in the exoskeleton of arthropods. So when you step on a bug, or if you are to have crab legs and you break the shell open to get to the yummy, juicy flesh in the middle there, that is chitin that you're breaking your way through. So because the exoskeleton cannot grow, so because of that external skeleton that cannot grow, they must molt as they grow to form a larger exoskeleton. I've got some really super cool videos that I'll attach in the classroom so that you can take a look at those separately. But that exoskeleton, once again, can't grow, so they've got to molt out of it. So here are some other shared characteristics of all arthropods. They have a complete digestive system, which once again means that they have one opening for food to go in and another opening for waste to exit. So they have a mouth. They have a complicated, complex systems because they have bilateral symmetry, right? They've got that head region and things like that. So there's going to be a mouth, a stomach, intestine, and an anus. So there's a complete digestive system. They are sexual reproducers. There's actually going to be separate sexes. So you're going to have a female lobster and a male lobster. There's going to be internal fertilization, and as those eggs are laid, then the eggs are fertilized. And for their circulation, they have an open circulatory system. So all arthropods have an open circulatory system. They do have a heart that will pump and will push the oxygenated hemolymph around that will kind of bathe the organs and bring oxygen to them. So there are no blood vessels because we know once again that there is an open circulatory system. You can see in this crayfish here, kind of following that black arrow, you can see where the heart is located in crayfish. So, speaking of crayfish, let's get to the very first class that we're going to discuss. So, all three classes are going to share the things that we just discussed. They're all going to be bilaterally symmetrical. They are all going to have an open circulatory system. They are going to have a complete digestive system, as well as they are going to reproduce sexually with having separate sexes, where the eggs are going, or the fertilization is going to happen as the eggs are laid and the sperm is put in internally. But let's talk about what separates the crustaceans from the other two classes that we're going to discuss. So, first of all, most are found in aquatic habitats. So, we've got, like, for example, the crabs, lobsters, shrimp. All of these organisms are going to be in our class Crustacea. For their number of body segments, they have two body segments. They have a cephalothorax and an abdomen. So I know we kind of talk a lot about like breaking down words down. So here's this cephala once again. So cephala we know is just like cephalization. That's the head region, right? And the thorax is going to be kind of like the mid body region. So when we're looking at crustaceans, when we talk about their actual cephalothorax, what we're looking at is going to be the head and the thorax region are kind of combined. So this is the cephalothorax, and then this region is the abdomen on this lobster down there. So you have the head region here, and then you have the rest of the animal is going to be the abdomen. Kind of the same thing on this shrimp. The cephalothorax is here, and then the rest will be the abdomen. So that's what you're going to be looking at when we're talking about a cephalothorax, just to kind of clear that up. And just to also talk about the number of legs, it's going to vary. There's generally 2 legs per body segment, but that can vary as well. So there's another thing about these organisms that separates them into their own class, and this is kind of what makes lobsters, crayfish, crabs, shrimp all be in the same class, is that they have gills to absorb the oxygen because they do live in an aquatic habitat. They have eyes on stalks, and you can see them very clearly here, right, on this crab. Those are my eyes on stalks, as well as they have green glands to filter liquid waste. So I'm not sure how many of you have actually ever eaten an entire whole lobster, but in between the cephalothorax and the abdomen. So the abdomen is where you're going to have that really super yummy lobster tail. And this is going to be a cephalothorax. This region right here are going to have green glands, and that's where they're actually going to filter out and excrete their liquid. They're going to filter out their liquid waste, right? So if you ever get a lobster whole and you see there's a greenish part to it, you're definitely going to want to avoid that, right? So those are the characteristics of all crustaceans. Now let's talk about the Chelocerata. So this is probably a word or a term that is very new to you. You'll see where the term or the class Chelocerata comes from. So some examples of organisms that fall into this class are spiders, scorpions, and actually horseshoe crabs. So many people think horseshoe crabs are crustaceans, but they're actually Chelocerata. And let me tell you why. All right. It's called this because they have these special mouth parts called chelicerae. So you can kind of see where the Chelocerata comes from. So these organisms have these special mouth parts called the chelicerae. And you can see what the chelicerae look like right here, especially on this tarantula that's actually been turned onto its dorsal side, right? So we're looking at it from its ventral side up. So these are the chelicerae. And what the chelicerae actually do, they're like fangs, if you think about them like that. They inject digestive juices into the prey to liquefy them before eating. So any arthropod that has chelicerae are going to be in this class, Chelicerata. So they too have 2 body segments. They have a cephalothorax and an abdomen. They have 8 walking legs. So they have 8 walking legs. So they have 4 on each side because they're bilateral. And they're going to have that cephalothorax. So their head and thorax region are going to be kind of combined together. And then their abdomen is going to be separate. So what actually separates a lot of these, so now they're specialized structures. Remember we talked about how crustaceans had had gills to breathe. the Chelicerata are going to have book lungs for respiration. And the reason why they call them book lungs is because when they're inhaling, they literally look like pages of a book that when you open the book and when they exhale, they close. So they call them book lungs because they are not aquatic animals, right? They do not have any antennae. So this is something like they actually have complex eyes. They have 4 pairs of eyes that are located in the cephalothorax region, but there's no antennae. And they have these specialized parts called these pedipalps. So these appendages here are not used for walking. These things that I'm circling right now in red are called pedipalps, and that's what they use to actually feel. And this is something that really helps, especially with the spiders, right? When they build their webs, when something lands into their web, their pedipalps are very, very sensitive and can sense that and tells them which direction it came from and whatnot. So even if their eyes aren't facing in that direction, their pedipalps are going to really help guide them in that direction. So these are all the organisms that fall into the class Chelicerata. So remember, they're going to still have all of the characteristics of all arthropods. So the things that are going to separate them are that they're going to have these specialized mouth parts called chelicerae, which are like fangs that insert digestive juices into their prey so that they can liquefy them before eating, as well as they're going to have book lungs. They're not going to have antennae. They're going to have these little pedipalps at the front in their cephalothorax region that they do not use to walk on. They use those to feel. And they are going to have 4 pairs of eyes. So they're going to have a total of 8 eyes, as well as 8 legs. So let's get into our last class. This is the class Insecta, and you'll see now why these organisms are separate from the other organisms. So when we're looking at this, we're going to be talking about, there's so many I could list here, but for example, ants, beetles, bees, grasshoppers, they're going to have a specific physical characteristics, all of these organisms, in order to fall into this class Insecta. So they're all going to have 1 pair of antennae. Now remember, these are bilaterally symmetrical, so that means they're going to have a total of 2 antennae, 1 on each side, and they're going to use this for feeling, right? And they're going to have actually 3 body segments. So there's going to be a head, there's going to be a thorax, and then there's going to be an abdomen. So let me show you how there's 3 different regions here on this bee. So you have, this is my head region. So this is the cephalization, right? But that's just the head. Then this mid region here is the thorax. And then this back region here is the abdomen. So there's going to be 3 distinct sections in the class Insecta with the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. They're going to have 6 walking legs. So remember, there's going to be 3 on each side. And those walking legs, as you can see according to this diagram here that I have for you, are generally going to be attached to the thorax region. Notice how the abdomen doesn't have any legs or anything on it, because you're going to see there's other specialized structures that are there. And the head is where you're going to have your antennae. So generally, the legs, the 6 legs, are located at the thorax. Here are the specialized structures of the class Insecta. So most have 1 or 2 pairs of wings. So that means most have 2 or 4 wings on them. They have some specialized mouth parts that kind of work together. And you can see, obviously, a mosquito's mouth part is going to be a little different than a honeybee's. The oxygen, though, for all insects is actually going to enter in through these holes called spiracles. And it's really interesting. If you've never noticed it before, I'll try to see if I can find some grasshoppers. You can actually, when you look at the grasshoppers from the side, you can see that they have these little holes that go all the length of their abdomen, and those are the spiracles. And this is where the oxygen is going to enter. It's going to circulate through the tracheae of the organism. Remember, once again, there's an open circulatory system, so the organs are being bathed in that hemolymph, but that's where the oxygen is going to enter on insects. And the last thing is that we're going to have the liquid waste is going to be extracted by the Malpighian tubules. So we had the green glands in the crustaceans that are going to filter out this liquid waste, and the insects are going to have these Malpighian tubules to them. I will also share with you a video about spiracles separately too. But so these are the 3 major classes of arthropods. Remember that the characteristics of all arthropods are going to be shared by these 3. The biggest thing that I will tell you that you will need to be able to recall on labs and assessments and things like that is number of body parts, number of legs, and things of that nature. Okay, so kind of looking at what makes an insect different than a Chelocerata and things like that. So those specialized body parts, as well as their body segments and number of legs. So I hope that if you need to pause this video, go back and rewind if you need to listen to it again, and make sure you check out the separate videos that I'm going to attach as well.